I got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got jungle peace, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA. 神羅転生
Hello, how are you all? I hope you are all doing well. In this video we will soon discuss some of the Bankai that have just been shown in the Mango Bleach story arc 1000-Year Blood War. We all know that the last chapter of Mango Bleach, which begins on chapter 480, has ended in chapter 686 with the title 1000-Year Blood War. This manga tells of the war that took place between Shinigami and the Quincy, in which there are various kinds of battles that are very interesting to observe. And the most interesting thing in Chapter 1 is the disclosure of several Bankai that have never been shown in the anime. For more details, let's discuss one by one. Chojiro Sasakibe with Bankai Koko Ganryo Rikyu. It's really ironic in the Mango story, this one Bankai is not shown by the original owner. That's because the owner Chojiro Sasakibe died in the fight and his carcass was stolen by Driscoll Bursey. At that time in chapter 504, when Driscoll Bursey faced Yamamoto, he immediately took out Chojiro Sasakibe's Bankai named Koko Ganryo Rikyu. When released, it will appear a wisp of purple lightning above the user's head. Which of these clumps of thunderbolt with tremendous power will strike down and rain down on the opponent's body? It is known that the power of this Bankai is almost the same concept as the power of Hitsugaya's Zanpakuto, which is able to regulate the weather. It's just that Chojiro's Bankai is more focused on thunder and the resulting thunderstorm. Even Yamamoto himself said that the scar on the forehead all along caused by Chojiro's carcass attack a long time ago. Jinryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto with Zanka no Tachi's Bankai. After a long time of waiting, finally, in chapter 506 the commander Yamamoto issued his strongest Bankai named Zanka no Tachi. A strongest fire-type Bankai that can devour its enemies to ashes. When this Bankai is activated, there are 4 forms of abilities that Yamamoto can use. Zanka no Tachi, Higashi. This technique concentrates all of Zanka's Ryujin flames into the tip of Yamamoto's sword. Which if the sword is swung, then everything that is hit will be scorched by fire. This ability is considered to be very deadly, in fact, so deadly that even the Blutvene Wandenrake will not be able to withstand this attack. Zanka no Tachi, Nishi. This technique diverts Zanka's Ryujin flames throughout Yamamoto's body. Later on, Yamamoto's body will be enveloped in hot flames reaching 15 million degrees Celsius, and with the heat resembling the sun, then making Yamamoto impossible for the opponent to touch. Zanka no Tachi, Minami. This technique allows Yamamoto to raise an army of the undead from the ground. This undead is known to be people who had been killed by his Ryuji Zanka fire. And by reviving these corpses, Yamamoto can command everything to attack anyone who is considered an enemy. Zanka no Tachi, Kita. This technique allows the sword to destroy anything it hits. And this last form is used by Yamamoto as the closing of his fight against Yamamoto. In addition to its own shortcomings, Bankai is too hot to be activated for a long time. Because if it is used for too long, the entire battle area will be covered by a very powerful fire. Retsu Unohana with Minazuki Bankai. Retsu Unohana's Bankai was only shown in chapter 526. At that time, Unohana was fighting Zaraki in order to carry out his duties, which wanted to make Zaraki stronger. Although this carcass is classified as a Bankai, which is still a mystery, because it is not explained so specifically. But in the manga, we can see. When his Bankai is activated, the blade of Unohana's sword will be covered in a blood-red viscous liquid. Which this liquid functions as a very strong acid, so that if anyone is exposed to this acid, the person will instantly melt and only the bones will remain. Like what happened to Zaraki, who was repeatedly exposed to the liquid. But at that time, thanks to Unohana's super-fast healing, Zaraki could be healed up to many times. Then for his own shortcomings, this Bankai can also hurt the user. Like what happened to Unohana, who at that time also turned into a skeleton due to being exposed to his acid liquid. But even so, this Bankai deficiency can be overcome with very reliable healing skills or techniques. Rojuro Otoribashi with his Bankai Kinshura Butadin. Rojuro's Bankai is shown in chapter 561 against a masked DE masculine, even though it only appears very briefly, but this Bankai's ability is quite unique and deadly. Because when his Bankai is activated, Rojuro will use several giant creatures called Death Dancers. The appearance of this giant creature was also followed by the presence of a pair of giant hands floating above it. As for how it works, Rojuro will act as a conductor who manages the Death Dancers. And by using a musical instrument he will create an illusion to harm the opponent's body. When Rojuro plays a scene called Sea Drift, his opponent's body will be flooded by a large amount of water. Then when Rojuro plays a scene called Prometheus, his opponent's body will be surrounded by blazing flames. Even though it was all an illusion, the attack felt real and strong enough to physically damage the target. But unfortunately, this very unique Bankai has one weakness, namely if the target does not have the ability to hear, then this Bankai will not be able to work. Because basically, every music he plays is an illusion that will be heard by the target on his death stage. Kuchiki Rukia with Haka no Togame's Bankai. Kuchiki was only able to get his Bankai during the war against Quincy. At that time Kuchiki, after training very hard in the Soul King Palace, Kuchiki managed to master his Bankai form perfectly. And in chapter 569 Kuchiki begins to show his Bankai form when fighting against his Not. At that time when his Bankai was activated, Kuchiki's appearance changed drastically. She was wearing a white kimono with hair that had also turned snow white. And with the release of this Bankai, Kuchiki is also able to create a cloud of mist that covers a large area around him, which causes the ambient temperature to decrease until it reaches absolute zero. Therefore, whatever is in the fog area, then everything will freeze instantly. And in a matter of seconds, everything will shatter into chunks of ice. Apart from the mist, physical contact with Kuchiki itself can also cause a person to freeze and break instantly. So do not be surprised that this one carcass is quite deadly for anyone who wants to fight it. Then for its own weakness, Bankai is very difficult to use, because its ability is closely related to body temperature. If only once did Kuchiki Rukia make a mistake in regulating her body temperature, Rukia might even be killed by her own Bankai. Moreover, this Bankai also cannot be used for too long, because if it is done later, Kuchiki's body will actually be damaged. Ichibe Hyosube with Shirafute Ikamanji's Bankai. This character is one of the first characters to appear in the Bleach manga story, where at that time he appeared as the leader of the Shinigami who became members of the Royal Guard. In his fight against Yawatch, to be exact, in chapter 605, Ichibe has immediately shown the power of his Zanpakuto named Ikamanji. It is known that this Zanpakuto is the first Zanpakuto to reach the Bankai level. When the blade is released, the Zanpakuto, which was originally in the form of a brush, will turn into a sharp object that can emit black ink. Whatever is covered in this ink, then all will lose their life as well as their strength. Every time Ichibe releases Ikamanji, all the black color of all living and inanimate objects that exist throughout the world will become his strength. And in this Sekai mode, Ichibe also has a technique where when he drinks a cup of darkness, he can bring destruction to the opponent by eliminating all the darkness that is in his opponent. So with this destruction, even his opponent would not be able to reincarnate again. Then when his Bankai is released, Ikamanji's brush will turn white. With this brush change, Ichibe will have the ability to change the target's name by writing kanji letters on his body, which will also affect the power of the target he renames. Shunsui Kayaraku with his Bankai Kaiten Kayakatsu Karamatsu Shinju. The Bankai of the Gotei 13 commander was only shown in chapter 647 when he faced Leelbaro. At that moment when his Bankai was released, a dark aura would cover a large area around him. This aura changed the perception of others to be darker, more gloomy, and filled with despair, as if it was the realization of a sad story. This Bankai inflicts damage on the opponent according to the story told. At Bankai level 1 named Tamaraikiza no Wakachiai, all wounds received by Kayaraku will be copied to the opponent. It hints at the story of a man who suffered the same wound as his partner. Then Bankai Level 2 Zankal No Shitone, black spots will appear all over the opponent's body, and will cause blood to come out of the spots. This technique is hinted at in the story of a man who felt ashamed because he had hurt his partner until he finally fell ill and contracted an incurable disease. Then at Bankai Level 3 Dangyo No Fuchi, a large amount of water will engulf Chojiro and his opponent, which will cause them to sink and run out of Retsu even more. This technique is based on the story of a man and his partner who decide to throw themselves into rushing water. The last Bankai Level 4 Ito Kiribasami Kaizome no Natabio. At this level, Chojiro will wrap a white thread around his opponent's throat several times, before finally pulling it tight, which will destroy the opponent's throat and head and explode instantly, as the closing of the story that is told. This technique hints at the regret of a man who ultimately decides to cut his own neck. Although this Bankai has a very terrible level of ability. But in fact, this Bankai has one weakness, which lies in its indiscriminate use. Anyone who is within range, then that person will also be affected. Therefore, in using his Bankai, Chojiro is always careful to pay attention to the presence of his comrades around him. Kisuke Urahara with his Bankai Kanon Baraki Benihime Aratane. After a long time, this character who is known to be very genius has finally shown his Bankai abilities. Precisely in chapter 664 when he faced a skin. The moment his Bankai was released, a gigantic female figure with the body of a mannequin appeared behind Urahara. And with this Bankai activated, Urahara will have the ability to restructure anything he touches, which can be used for strategic purposes, both attacking and defending. By attacking, Urahara is able to leave anything in its area of effect, while defensively Urahara can heal parts of his body by rebuilding the injured body. In addition, doing this restructuring can increase his physical strength to become greater. But unfortunately, besides all that, the weakness of this one Bankai is in its limited effect. If the Bankai is deactivated, or if the opponent is out of range, then any changes made to the user's or opponent's body will be lost. Kenpachi Zaraki with his Bankai unnamed years of appearing without Shurikai and corpses, now this powerful character finally has both. His Shurikai named No Zarashi was first issued when he faced the Grammys in chapter 577. When his Shurikai was released, his Zanpakuto would change shape into a large axe that has extraordinary strength and destructive power. Even large meteors can be destroyed easily by this Shurikai. Then when Zaraki faced Gerard Valkyrie in chapter 669, at that time Zaraki accidentally released his Bankai. When released, Zaraki transforms into a figure resembling a demon, with a red body with horns appearing. Zaraki gets very strong and wild powers. The blade at that instant turns smaller and jagged like a machete. But unfortunately, this too strong power apparently cannot be controlled by Zaraki, because when in his Bankai stage, Zaraki will lose his mind and can only nod brutally. And because of the immense power he got, Zaraki couldn't use it much longer, because his unprepared body will crumble if he is constantly forced to endure. That's all for the discussion in this video. What do you think? Which is the newest Bankai, the strongest? Please comment. Thank you for watching this video until it's finished. See you in the next video.